Randy was setting this up and he said intentional. And you gave some great examples of ways you reinforce it right now. Something we haven't talked about yet, which I think is a real mystery to most companies that are values led. How do you select talent? This is the Leadership Foundry podcast. I'm your co-host this week, Brandon Smith, joined with Randy Hain, my co-host and co-founder of the Leadership Foundry podcast. This week, we are going to be talking about a topic that I think, while evergreen, is really, really important and frankly has been underrepresented in recent years. We're going to talk about setting and leading with company values. Not only how do we promote those values and select those values, but how we even hire people based on those values. So to help us on our conversation here today, we have Doran Oancia. He is the president and CEO at Chemex Global. Doran has got a great story about not only his career, but how he put values in place at Chemex. And he really talks about the process of not only selecting the values, but even hiring folks on the values. So I know you're going to enjoy the conversation, whether you're a team lead or a CEO. There's opportunities in here to make 2024 a values-driven year for you and your team. Well, Doran, so excited to have you here on our podcast today. Excited for your conversation today and some of the great things that you and your company are up to, particularly on how you bring values into the business, hire talent, make decisions. Randy and I, it's something we're both very passionate about. So really, really thrilled to have you on the show here today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm a big fan and follower of your work. And I think that's one of the things people can do to help in their leader journeys is follow you all and the work that you're doing. But I'm pleased to be able to come and offer whatever I can about some of the things that we've been doing to improve our journey on this front. So thank you.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Well, so I'm going to start with the first question, and then I'll let Randy kind of jump in as you kind of dive into this a little bit. But for the listeners that maybe don't know your journey or don't know much about the good work you and your company are up to, share a little bit about your journey. Kind of what got you ultimately into the seat you're sitting in today?
Sure, thank you. So I really, as I kind of reflect back now on about 30 years, I've got a kind of a two-part journey. So went out of business school and spent the first half of my career really in global consumer products companies, household names people would know, Procter & Gamble, very well admired companies. And one of the things that as I reflect back that those companies had was they really developed their people. And what ultimately led me to leave that industry was a feeling that they're so good at what they do. And some of the companies that I worked for, that it's very hard for someone to add unique value. You know, you realize that, hey, I could wake up one day, and I think many people could probably relate to this. And if I was to get hit by that proverbial bus that we're always worried about hitting people, you know, there's 10 other people that could come in and do my job as well. So I really decided I wanted to go a different route and really take the things that I'd learned, went into the energy industry. And so I've been now in the energy industry for about the same amount of time, about 15 years now, in all different facets of the energy industry, now primarily focused on the renewable space and what we call the energy transition, which I think most people understand generally what we mean by that, and in much smaller organizations. And so they really feel very, very blessed and fortunate to be able to look back and take the things that I learned from companies that invested in me early on and bring those into a context where sometimes either based on the size or the type of the business, it's a lot less common to bring ideas, the things that you all talk about on your show and in your books, things that Jim Collins and people like that are, you know, transferable skills and concepts to all organizations. And that's a big part of how I've tried to operate. And I'm now in Houston, Texas, leading a company called Chemex. And we're working on all kinds of exciting projects, waste plastic to fuel, different things on the energy transition and recycling and reusing and helping with our energy challenges for the coming decades.
Doran, you know, first of all, welcome. It's so good to see you again, and thanks for being on the show. Just to piggyback on that, you know, really interesting sort of look at this fascinating career journey you've had. But what strikes me as you're unpacking that is it's an accumulation of experiences. And I'm sure these have been personal and professional experiences that you've been gaining. And talk about a little bit more about that, where you used what you got in the first 15 years of your career, then you kind of pivoted and you built some more experiences. Tell us a little bit about that, because I think a lot of our listeners sometimes look at their career in a very awkward way. They see it, okay, I had this job and that job, and I think we all would agree that we're really an accumulation of those experiences. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great observation, and I think really it's probably no different than something we tell our kids sometimes. Even, you have good teachers and bad teachers, and what can you learn from every one of those experiences and opportunities? And so, at the time, I had no idea, right? Working for world-class organizations, and this is just what they did. And so, again, I feel very, very fortunate that I had people early on that were investing in my development, giving me principles of, hey, a person's training should include things that make them better in the job they're in today, but also that you develop them professionally. And so some of those principles you don't see until in retrospect, but that's just, I think, partly a little bit how I'm wired also, is what can I take from this person? Every single person I've had the chance to work for in my career, there's something. And recently, my very first manager from the early 90s retired. And I've been out of touch with this person, this woman, for quite a number of years. We live a long ways apart from each other. But as people on LinkedIn were congratulating her, I told her, there are things that you taught me in the first 6 months of my career that I use today, right? And that's the legacy, right? And so she paid that forward, and I try to pay that forward and build into what I do. So I think it's a good observation. I think everyone should try to take a little bit of time from time to time and just think about that, and just be grateful for the organizations and the people along the way that have invested in us. And then me looking forward, I think that's a big part of how I try to lead, is making the company successful with or without me, right? And instilling those principles in people that were committed to developing new, young. It's very exciting to watch people earlier in their careers and see them growing and developing and taking on new challenges and opportunities. And, my opportunity to do what that woman did for me early in my career for people earlier in their journeys.
Love that. Brandon, that reminds me of something that one of our previous guests, Andreas Widmer, said. Andreas said that, companies are really just a constellation of products and services and things. What really matters is people. And I think that's what Doran seems to be talking about here, really getting to the heart of this. It's all about people and how you engage with them and how you learn from them.
Yeah. And Doran, so you mentioned right there in that answer, you talk about things like appreciation, but you also said principles, which is a nice segue into what we're going to talk about here today. How do we create a values-driven, values-led organization and even select talent on that? So a good starting place for us on that. Tell us a little bit how you think about that. When you think about values, and you were thinking about for Chemex and putting in the values in place for the business, how did you start that process? And what does the concept of values mean to you?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we could have a whole long day discussion about, what are values and what are virtues, and it's tricky sometimes because virtues is a word that's a little less common, and I think values is a little more commonly used, even though I think about, the aspects of virtue, which goes back to Aristotle and Aquinas, right? And people like great thinkers like that in history. But for me, values is really about how the fabric of your culture, of your organization, and how you're going to operate. What are the operating principles, right? We have standard operating procedures, whether you have a manufacturing facility or you're a field welder or whatever your position is. You're a cook they had the CEO of Crumble on at some time, and so they have standard operating procedures for their people, right? But the values are, how are we going to operate and abide by them? And as I've come to learn more about this topic, and there's a wealth of resources out there, even the great Harvard Business Review has all kinds of articles on this about how you build, how you start this journey. So there's a lot of help out there. We brought in a consultant to help us. The organization that I'm at now 5 years ago didn't have any defined values. But it didn't take long in talking to the people that had been there to discover that there were some implicit in how they operated and what was important to them. And so we were able to draw out in a collaborative fashion with the help of a third party, define our values. We chose 6. We ranked them. We define them. That's the other thing that I think is really important. So I'll give you a couple examples for Chemex, right? One of our first value is safety. And in the industrial space, that's very common. But what do we mean when we say safety? So our simple definition is everyone home safe every night. Super easy to understand and a great way to measure it, right? The other one is integrity. Okay, that's common. Many companies will talk about integrity. How do we define integrity at our company? Do the right thing regardless of the cost. I mean, that's a very helpful framework for people to say, okay, well, I know integrity is a value, but gee, if I make this concession to this customer, we're going to lose $150,000. Well, wait a minute, what do we say integrity means? Do the right thing regardless of the cost. Okay, and so then it's all about, you define them, you go through that process, you publish them, you live them. And as we talk about, that's the real test. I get an opportunity at our company to meet most people on the day that they started the organization. And what I like to do is really put myself out there and say, these are important. I want you to know them. I want a reference card in your office or your place where you work where you can refer to these. You're going to hear lots about them. But most importantly, new employee, Randy, if you're a new hire, like if you ever see us not living these, you should call me directly and immediately. That's how important these are to me. And I think making that statement is something that then sets the tone. I'm a big believer in that kind of first day principle for new employees. And so we take a lot of time that the first day isn't just about, here's your computer, here's your office, here's your password, here's your key card, right? It's about why is this company different? What are we expecting from you? And what are the standard behaviors that we're going to try to live by? So I think that's really the starting point, is defining them, articulating them, getting some support so they're clear and crisp and can be visible throughout the organization.
So Doran, one thing that you said in here, real subtle, but really important because it's exceptionally rare. I mean, there are companies, not as many as it used to be, frankly, that are values driven and articulate their values. And it's, my belief is it's because, again, everything's urgent all the time. So
right.
this is pushed over to the side, even though it's so important. But you said you also prioritize or rank order your values.
Yes.
And the only other organization that I've known who used to historically do that would be Disney. So when they would teach their cast members their values, they would rank order those. So tell us a little bit about the process of rank ordering. Was that challenging, and how do you drive that today? I mean, because most companies just say, here are 5 values, and they're almost communicating they're equally important. And you make the important point that typically in manufacturing settings, safety is always a value, and it's typically number one because there's so many opportunities to get hurt. What was it like to go through the process of ranking them, and how do you kind of encourage that or lead that way?
That's a great question. And it is very interesting when you get into you think, well, yeah, they're all important. And we were challenged by the person that we brought in to really think about that. And so we had our first 3 are safety, people, and customers. And those 3 alone, you get some very interesting conversations, right? People are like, well, it's all about people. Our people is our biggest asset. People needs to be number one. And then it's all about customers, right? We wouldn't exist if we didn't have customers. And so that's where I think a facilitator can really help ask tough questions. You really need to think about some specific scenarios. And so for us, it was, hey, if we don't keep our people safe in a manufacturing environment, then nothing else we do matters, and we won't have customers, and no one will come and work for us. So for us, that's kind of the process that led us down the road to prioritize them. The thing that we did that was kind of fun to help people remember them in order was we created a mnemonic challenge. And this is maybe an idea people can have. And so if you don't know what a mnemonic is, right, it's you take the first letter of a series of words. And we came up with a challenge and a contest where we gave somebody, a couple $100 to go out to dinner to come up with one. And someone came up with one for us that was this: simply put, Chemex is quite perfect. Chemex being the name of our company. And so that was a real fun way. And we got some very colorful and interesting ones for people. And now it's really easy for people to remember that phrase. And then I will do this at company meetings from time to time, saying, and I'll call people out by name sometimes. Simon, please stand up and tell us what are the 6 values of Chemex in order. And they'll think of this little phrase and they can do it in order. Because I remember them in order, but I also want everyone in the organization to remember them in order. So we had some fun with that too along the way. But you really do, you're right. I hadn't thought about Disney as an example, but I think that's a great point. For us, there was value in saying, if you get into a conflict, what is going to trump what in your values hierarchy? And it's an interesting exercise that brings a lot more fruit and definition to your values as an organization.
Doran, there's something about this conversation that is really, it's so different from past conversations I know Brandon and I have had and other guests have had about values. And I want to really spotlight this because I think you're really talking about something that is transcendent. You don't see it very often. You talked about you are very good, you and your team are good about defining the values, reinforcing the values, but this is just something you never hear. You're also willing to be held accountable for the implementation of the values. Because in our experience, you often see values as a checklist in the lobby. It's on the website. It looks really, really good. But you're talking about, and I'd love for you to speak to this, you're talking about intentionality applied to your values. So talk a little bit about that, because having the CEO, and I assume your fellow leaders, driving this from the beginning, but also willing to be held accountable is fascinating, but there's got to be intentionality there. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's a process. You're right, Randy, and it's a never-ending process, right? And so one of the things that I do that's just something along the way I decided to do. One of the challenges in any organization is communication, having people feel like they know what's happening, what we're doing, what we're all about. And so a few years ago, I just sent out a short weekly note to our staff. And I would try to keep it to 3 points, right? 3 is a great, easy number. And typically there'd be some message in there. And I would lead with my message of the week of, hey, this is what we need to really focus on or think about. What I learned, and then along the way, number 3, when I started this, was I would do a shout out. And so I would ask people around, hey, have you seen, again, you try to catch people doing something great. Have you seen any good examples of somebody living up one of our values? And it didn't take very long to find those examples. Mm-hmm. So I do a shout out and I'd say, hey guys, I just want to recognize Brandon, this week for this customer situation. And this was the challenge, and it required people to mobilize over the weekend. And not that we want people working, 24/7, but in this situation, we responded to the challenge, and great job. Right? Exemplifying our customer value. What I found is that people really love that, and they loved reading that. So that's now the first thing on my list. And I hope they'll read all the way through to number 3, where I'm driving that message about strategy or actions we're doing, but number 1. And so that's a really good way. And what it does is it kind of catches in the organization where I now get spontaneously emails, several a week usually, that are, hey, Doran, can you please put a shout out in the coming weeks for this person or this team or this thing. And so that helps. That's a real good practical way to help live the values, because you're absolutely right. And so you got to have a supply of these little cards that people can keep them in their desk. I've got one by my computer. So if people see me on a Teams, I'm in a different office today. You don't see it behind me. I don't have a wall, but they can see it in my office. I paste it into my weekly notes, and it's just ongoing reinforcement. And no matter how good you think you're doing at it, you're probably not doing as good as you think you are, because it's a continual challenge to reinforce that. There's one other little thing that we do, which is for people that have any kind of a safety related, there's sometimes something called a safety observation. So people, that's kind of what's called a behavioral-based safety program. People will do safety observations. Well, we expanded that concept at our company to values observation. So people can actually go in and log that, hey, I just want to recognize this person for doing this specific thing. And we have a simple little tool that's on everyone's desktop at the organization. And just by the process of logging that value, they actually get a little coupon that they can use to earn points and buy for different rewards and things. So there's lots of little tricks. If people really want to go down this road, there's a lot of good ways you can do it.
So I want to build on something, because Randy was setting this up and he said intentional. And you gave some great examples of ways you reinforce it right now. Something we haven't talked about yet, which I think is a real mystery to most companies that are values led. How do you select talent? People you're interviewing off the street and try and screen them for values. So have you found any interesting ways or approaches to tease out values alignment in the interview process? Because I think I know leaders right now listening to this would love to get some tips on how to do that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think Howard Schultz, the Starbucks CEO, said at one time that, resumes can't tell you whether someone will fit into a company's culture, right? And here I am, and it's a technical company. I basically run an engineering company, and I'm not an engineer, right? And so it's very easy for me to observe that when we're hiring a senior technical role, that we're all focused on all of those technical requirements. And frankly, that's just the price of admission, right? Like they've got to be able to fulfill the responsibilities. But the reality is that that's the easy part of screening someone's resume and validating is whether they have the competencies and the skills to do the work. This is definitely the harder part. But I do think that there's some emerging things happening on this front. We've used something that's called an ethics tool that helps, where people go in, and we've been very open about that, hey, and especially in certain roles. For example, we hired a new human resources leader last year. It was really critical to us that person had our values. And again, I think values are not something, they're what people have, right? It's not, oh yeah, I like Chemex's values, I can go, and you do or you don't, right? And so it's really, I think that's the first thing I would say is you do want to find out if that person does share those values. And people are very familiar with behavioral-based interviews, right? Where you're going to go along and say, hey, Brandon, give me an example of, a big challenge that you had and how you overcame that. We're all used to those questions. So you do the same with values. You say, give me an example of where you ran into what was potentially an ethical dilemma and how you resolved that. Give me an example of where, your integrity was questioned and how you resolved that. You will learn a lot about people just by asking questions. And so I don't think you need to be too covert about it. But, the other one, and I'm sure you guys have both heard this quote, right? I don't think Buffett is the originator of it, but he talks about this in terms of how you have these in order. He says, we look for three things in people: integrity, intelligence, and energy. And if they don't have the first one, the other two will kill you. So talk about having those things in order, right? So that alone speaks to that there's got to be a hierarchy of these values, because if you had integrity last and you said, well, yeah, they got intelligence and they got energy, so I'm not going to worry as much about that. Boy, if someone like Buffett tells you that'll kill you, I listen pretty closely to something like that. So yeah, I definitely think it's really a decision. HR teams out there's a lot of resources available. I think there's growing awareness that hiring for fit and hiring for culture and values is important. And so, even as simple as something as saying, have you read our values? That's a good indicator right there. Have you read what many people have? That'll tell you something about the candidates. Or here's Chemex's values. Is there anything here that strikes you as interesting or challenging, or that aligns with how you think about things? And trying to spend a little bit of that interview time just getting to see how that person may think and respond. Well worth the effort.
I want Randy to take the next question, but I want to ask just a quick follow-up. Based on that approach, Doran, and you don't name names, but has there ever been a case where you said this person is not going to be a fit based on how they answered one of those questions?
Yes, I would say we have. And so it's only one of several screening tools that we use. I'm a big believer in, there's this saying out there, right? That's hire slow, fire fast. Mm-hmm. Jim Collins has another great saying, which is, it's not, people aren't your biggest asset. It's the right people that are your biggest asset. And so if those things are true, then you've got to be intentional in your recruiting process. And there are many great, peers and colleagues that have quotes that are about this very fact, about the time that you spend, not just developing people rather, but hiring the right people. So yes, I would, to be candid, more often we've made a mistake and we've uncovered something and so that's why we have work to do on this front, because we've hired someone and learned, sometimes relatively quickly, sometimes it takes longer. There's a values disconnect here, which is why I'm pretty passionate about getting better at it, and there's work to be done.
Doran, this is a fascinating insight, and so grateful just for your candor about this is how it works for us, because I think so many leaders, to what Brandon said earlier, are really eager to learn this and understand this. So here's something I want to throw at you. One of the things that Brandon and I often see in our leadership Foundry work is our clients often struggle with organizational alignment. The executive team's going this way, the vast body of people is going this way. They're not communicating consistently. There's just a lack of alignment around vision and purpose. What strikes me about listening to you is the consistent promotion of values promotes great alignment. It just seems that that must be something that you're seeing in Chemex, where we've got alignment, we're consistent about where we're going, we have a common language that we're all using. Speak to that, because we do see this lack of alignment everywhere, but it seems like you're giving leaders a formula, sort of a method if they'll listen. But I'd talk to that a little bit if you would.
Yeah, thank you. And I would say for me, I am a collaborative leader, right? I don't like to impose a lot of things.
Sure.
And I'm a big believer that, we've got all these great people. It's all about hiring the right people and then letting them do their job. But I really feel like, for those that are listening, that this is my non-negotiable, right? This is literally what our company will live or die by, whether I, get this right. Right. More than anything, this is something that I cannot cede any ground on. And I'll share with you something that one of my key partners, who's on our C-suite team as well, and people could figure out who this person is, and that's not a problem. Came from a very different background where people were independent workers, and so this was very foreign to him when I came in and talked about, hey, we need to define our values, we need a mission statement, we need to go through this process, and he played along, let's say, early on, but wasn't quite bought in. But over the years, as we've improved and refined it, and now we have something that is the test that we're going to use of how we're going to measure behavior and how we're going to hold people accountable. It's come back where he said, now I see what you were doing several years ago. So you had the title and it was your responsibility, and I went along with it as a result, but it takes time, right? And so I guess my encouragement to leaders out there would be to say, number one, you got to live or die by this. And again, it's nobody else's role more so than my responsibility to make sure that we live this. And I do expect to be the guy I want people maybe rolling their eyes saying, oh boy, here he's going to talk about values again, right? Yes, then we're doing it right. And you can't cede any ground on this, and have confidence that over time, it won't be perfect, and I'm not perfect, and we tell people that, right? That, but this is what we aspire to, and this is what we strive to, and that you will in time, I think, see that alignment, and people will have decisions to make. Now, Randy, to your point, if you have a leader along the way who just isn't going to get on board with the values, then I think at some point it becomes pretty obvious that you probably need to go a different direction.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
absolutely.
Great. Doran, you were talking about rolling their eyes. Immediately made me think of my three now almost college age kids when Dad starts to get on a value soapbox, and yet I'll hear them repeat the values later. So there's some value in being repeatable for certain. Well, Doran, this has been absolutely great. Such a rich conversation, and as you said, we could spend a whole day on this. We always ask all of our guests this final question. Randy and I are all about practical and all about helping folks kind of take these great ideas and put them into action. So what is one practical step that leaders listening today can start to do with their teams to help them improve and thrive tomorrow?
It's a great question, and I really love how you do this as part of your exercise, because I love listening to other people's answers. So I've thought about this, and it's going to take a little bit to set up, but basically one of our challenges for our organization this year is accountability. We did a strategic plan. We identified that this is something that it's a weakness, and I think it's a weakness and a challenge in every organization, I'm sure. It's people doing what they say they're going to do when they say they're going to do it. So I took some time and said, how am I going to drive this message home that it doesn't just sound like, Doran from on high, right? So I took a look I told you all about, I send a weekly note out and I do a shout out. I took a look at my performance over the last 2 years. And guess what? Quite a few weeks, I didn't send a note out. Even more, I didn't send it out on the first business day of the week. So I am going to share this week with our full company my scorecard of the last 2 years. And you'll see that my success rate of sending out even just sending the weekly note out is under 70% in each of the last 2 years. I've allowed myself to get busy and to not achieve a goal that I've set for myself. but nobody else has visibility to it. So I'm going to put myself out there and say, team, as part of my weekly note, I'm going to share my scorecard for the next 52 weeks. And I'm setting a new goal this year that 90% of the weeks by noon on the first business day of the week, so kind of a SMART goal for SMART goal people, you will have my note in your mailbox with the shout out and the weekly message that you've become accustomed to receiving from me. So I guess that's my encouragement for people to say, hey, if you're struggling with driving accountability, take that step. That's something that you can do, is think of a SMART goal that you can be a little vulnerable with your teams and go out there and set a goal that will be highly visible to the organization. I'm a little nervous about this goal. I toyed with, maybe should I set it as 80%? What if I can't quite achieve it? But I want it to be a difficult and challenging goal, and I want people in real time to see that I'm committed to that, because that, I think, is, we talk about leading by example. So that's the way that I thought of. So that would be my encouragement for your listeners, is to find a way. If you're struggling with driving a certain outcome in the organization, lead by example and put yourself out there.
Beautiful.
Love the humility and vulnerability of that.
Oh, 100%, Randy. I agree completely. Modeling it is the best way to really put something in place for leaders with their teams. And Doran, you're doing that. And the fact it's uncomfortable means you're probably doing it right.
We'll see the report card in 52 weeks.
So Doran, if people want to learn more about you, want to learn more about Chemex, where can they go?
I'd be happy for people to connect with me on LinkedIn, or check out a little more at the chemexglobal.com website about our organization and what we do. And I certainly welcome that. I think LinkedIn is an incredible way for people to get to know and build new relationships. Very grateful for that tool, but yeah, appreciate that.
Well, Doran, we are grateful for you. Thank you for
Absolutely.
your time today and all the education and insight you provided. Keep up the great work with your company and your team, and wishing you all the best in the coming year. Randy, I don't know about you, but I found that conversation so not only refreshing, but really enlightening. While the topic of values with companies is evergreen, I think Doran offered some really great thoughts.
I was just struck. I totally agree with you. And I was just struck by his hands-on perspective as a senior executive, as the CEO, really driving everything about values in his organization. And he talks so much about how it is his non-negotiable. This is the critical thing. And I think there's so many takeaways in this particular podcast for leaders. So I'm excited for people to hear it.
Partner, I think you're right. So this is going to be tricky, because here's what we're going to do. You're going to have two, so you got to pick just two. And I'm going to pick just two, which is really going to be hard. But I'm going to put you on the spot first. Okay. So that way, if you pick one of the ones I would have picked, it gives me a bonus one. So I'm selfishly making you go first, my friend. So what were two that you really, really loved?
So it was hard, because I took 2 pages of notes. That's how engaged I was. So this is my quick 2 takeaways. One is, and I commented on it during the podcast, I was struck by how focused he is on defining, reinforcing, and being willing to hold himself and the leadership team accountable for values. They define it, they reinforce it, they're willing to be held accountable, and that permeates the interview process, the onboarding, really the tenure of any employee there, which really speaks to intentionality, right? They're so intentional about that. So define, reinforce, and accountability. Love that. The other takeaway for me, and again, really hard to pick just two, was you and I see so many clients struggle with organizational alignment. Executive team is going this way, the rest of the team is going this way. And what he really is doing so well, and he's so humble about it, is by pushing and promoting values and making that permeate everything, they create alignment. There's a common language about where we are going. Our values drive everything. They reinforce that conversation. So the company is aligned and going in the same direction. Those are my takeaways. And again, very hard to pick just two.
Beautiful. Well, now you made my job harder. So I'm going to put my two under the big bucket of discipline. I thought he was very disciplined about how he did this.
Yes.
So the first one in the discipline was the process of selection. I want everyone to be reminded he said 6. He didn't say 8. He didn't say 10. He put a limit on it, 6.
Mm-hmm.
And then they went through the rare exercise of enumerating and rank ordering the 6.
Mm-hmm.
So a tremendous discipline. They just didn't do a value stew of 15. We could easily make that stew, but they did 6 and then they rank ordered them. Very hard. The second one was what he mentioned at the very end around his takeaway. He then sends out a weekly message. And in that message, he communicates a story about one of the values. So there's a disciplined process for communicating and reinforcing. Again, very, very hard. So it's easy to just kind of come up with values. It's hard to be disciplined about focus and communication. And I thought that was another big theme.
Excellent takeaways. I think we're both so just numb to the conversation about values because you see so many people talk about the checklist and we believe this. I've never heard a leader talk the way he did so thoroughly and so passionately about this is who we are and we will operate from these. So everything you said, I agree with.
So no matter what you were listening to, what you heard, Randy and I clearly are passionate about what we took away. But what matters most is what did you take away? So here's our challenge. As with all of our shows and episodes, what's that one thing based on what you heard today from Doran that you want to put in place with your team starting today that's going to help you and your team thrive tomorrow and the rest of the year?